Yo, what is up? It is your boy Zether, back at it again with a brand new video. Now, as you guys can see from the title, this is going to be what if Deku was Majin Buu? Or, more specifically, what if Deku was the reincarnation of Majin Buu, much like Oob from the show Dragon Ball GT. Now, I know that show wasn't exactly the greatest thing in the world, but it did bring us a couple of amazing things, such as Oob, Super Saiyan 4, the amazing soundtracks, and I figured I would do a what if, which I could basically get the chance to use the Dragon Ball GT theme song. So that's essentially what you guys are having in the background right now. But with that being said, guys, I don't exactly want to bore you guys with too much jibber jabber. So I'm just gonna go ahead and get right into this amazing series. So let's just go ahead and get started. Alright, so where we're actually going to be starting the story off is right at the moment where Goku wishes for Majin Buu to be reincarnated. See, in this version, when Goku actually ends up wishing for him to be reincarnated, this time he's not exactly specific. So when King Yama actually ends up reincarnating Oob, he basically ends up having it so that he becomes a pure-hearted person. And the moment that Deku was born, he's actually gonna be reincarnated as, Majin Buu. So the moment that Deku was born, a couple of things are actually going to be different about him off rip. See, instead of having, his green hair, he's actually going to have normal black hair. And he's actually going to be having some really normal looking person, except, he's just really going to be having black hair. That's the only real change to Izuku's, character as a whole. See, a lot of things are actually going to go by normal, except this version of Deku is going to grow up being way stronger than any of the other kids, and it would have pretty much just been assumed that Deku's pretty much going to grow up and be diagnosed with a super strength quirk or something, seeing that Deku basically has superior physical strength to a lot of the kids in his class. He's extremely powerful, and Deku never really knows why. That is, until he goes to the Quark Doctor one day, where, he's pretty much told that he's quirkless. He's about 4 years old at this point, and this is when he's pretty much told about his situation, as Deku would begin to pretty much just keep living a normal life, and he would proceed to basically go to school and tell people that, he was diagnosed as quirkless. But in this version of events, nobody except for Bakugo would actually think anything of that, seeing as Deku is physically stronger than every single one of them, except for Bakugo, seeing that he actually has a quirk, a very powerful one at that. And, it would be, his explosion, his nitroglycerin quirk, which, this is when, other people would just decide that it doesn't really matter if he has a quirk or not. Seeing that he's this physically strong, it might as well just be considered a weak enhancement quirk. As this is when we're now actually going to be skipping about 6 months after Deku's told that he's quirkless. See, on this particular day, Deku would pretty much just be in his bed, just chilling, honestly. He would be sleeping when he, out of nowhere, has a strange dream, or a vague flashback of one of his previous lives. He would begin to see a being, a pink one at that, with black eyes and red pupils, destroying an entire planet, and running around killing a bunch of beings, which are pretty much, stated to be Kais, as they would all be trying to run around and escape from this being who's pretty much just causing nothing but destruction and chaos, as he would see his first glimpse of a being using ki, or their aura or life energy. As from there, Deku would wake up in a cold sweat wondering what that was, as Deku would begin to breathe heavily going, who was that? As he would be terrified. He would be thinking of, what could have, made a being be this evil. As for the next couple of weeks, Deku would have flashbacks of different versions of Majin Buu. Going from Kid Buu to Evil Buu to Nice Buu to Super Buu. All 4 of the versions of them. And since technically Oob still hasn't been born, or the reincarnated version of GT hasn't been born, or isn't going to be happening, Deku would pretty much not even have a glimpse of him. The nicest version of Oob being, Super Buu, or, just Fat Buu. Those are really the only cool versions of Buu that we would be happening right now. And guys, if you guys can hear that little ice cream truck passing by, if you guys can hear that in the background, I'm sorry. Just, little ice cream man just passing by. I can't really do too much about it, so, just, it'll be here for about a minute or so. Anyways, this is when we're now actually going to be, going over a couple of different things. See, at first when Deku's, dealing with this little problem, he struggles with it at first, seeing that, he feels like he has some sort of weird connection to these weird beings, these Majin Buus, as that's what he sees from the vague flashbacks. He would see a flashback of a man with golden long hair, who pretty much just seems to be at his peak performance. He would have a halo on him, and Deku would always wonder what's going on with that situation. As, this is when a couple of years would pass, 2 to be exact, as he would notice that he would gain more and more characteristics of what these Majin Buus are, and he would slowly begin to gain the magic abilities of them. As time would go on, and Deku would, slowly gain even more abilities. By the time of him being 12 years old, he would have essentially gained every single one of the abilities that Majin Buu has. As this is when one day, we would have Deku pretty much arriving home at around the age of, let's say 12. Let's say 12. Deku would arrive home at around, oh, actually, I forgot to mention something. Should I? No. Actually, should I? I should. Anyways, this is when I forgot to mention something real quick, but we're gonna come back to what I was saying. So since Deku pretty much started gaining his abilities, pretty much Katsuki or Bakugo would have ended up feeling extremely inferior to Deku, and he would have ended up moving schools, changing his place because, well, he wasn't the top dog, and that was drastically hurting his grade and stuff like that. Seeing as Bakugo was quite used to that up until the age of 6, once Deku started developing his Majin Buu powers, I guess you could say. As, now we're going to go back to what I was talking about. See, this is when Deku would arrive on a particular day, as at this point, Deku would pretty much be one of the most popular kids in his class. See, Deku was extremely powerful, he has physical strength, and he has these amazing abilities that are just completely uncontrollable. They're insane, and they are so powerful. As this is when we would have Deku getting home, as his mom would have decided that she's going to play a little bit of a prank on him. As Deku would pretty much proceed to walk inside and lay his bag down as well as his keys, as he would say, "Mom, I'm home," as nobody would actually answer him, and Deku would be wondering what's going on. As this is when he would, go inside to his room, as Ingo would say, "Ah!" And this is when Deku would say, "Whoa!" And he would shoot a chocolate beam straight at Inko. This would actually be the first time that Deku was actually used this ability, since every single one of the other ones he would have already been adapted to, except for the chocolate beam. This is something that I figured I would give to him a little later on. Now, Deku at this point would pretty much only have the chocolate beam and things like that, seeing as I don't exactly want Deku to be too OP. Now, this is when Deku would, pretty much just turn his mother into chocolate, as, he would have accidentally ended up doing this, and this is when Deku would proceed to freak out, wondering what he did, as a couple of minutes would go by, and Deku would, proceed to try to create the same feeling that he had before, as he would turn his mother back, and she would say, What happened? As Deku would explain to her that she ended up startling him, and he accidentally turned her into chocolate, and she would say, "Really? You have that power too?" And she would say, "Izuku, where do all these abilities come from?" As this is when Deku would proceed to sit his mother down and tell her that there's something he's actually been wanting to tell her for a long time. See, ever since he was about the age of 4.5, he would have had these strange visions, or flashbacks I guess you could say, of these strange astral powerful cosmic beings that are, they're very similar in appearance, but some of them are pink and others are gray or black, I guess you could say. As she would begin to listen, and at first she would be like, what's it's talking about? As this is when Deku would go into more detail as to what he's talking about, and she would finally begin to understand. As Deku would say that for a while now, he's felt like he's linked to them, and he feels like he's sort of has something in common with them. As she would look at him and say, "Huh, that's interesting. A lot of people in Japan, in different religions, actually believe of a concept called as reincarnations." As Deku would say, "Yes, exactly. That's what I've always thought. I've always felt like I kind of did that stuff. I feel like I'm the reincarnation of them." As Inko would proceed to listen to her son speak about this stuff, and she would, proceed to tell him that that's okay. that just because he's the reincarnation of something that had something, that behaved different from him, doesn't mean he's the same person. See, everybody's different. Every single person is different. We're all humans, and if you believe a certain story, we're all linked to certain people. But we all have different personas. We all do different things with our quirks, and we all have different goals and desires. You may, even if you aren't even linked to them, or maybe you're not the reincarnation of this Majin Buu, you're still you, Izuku, and you're still my baby. As Deku would look towards his mother and say, well, I honestly didn't think you would react like this. Mom, I thought you'd freak out. As she would say, why would I freak out? And Deku would say, well, you've never been exactly the greatest at taking news like this. And she would say, oh, trust me, I started, pretty much believing in the unbelievable after you ended up developing a quirk, which the doctors actually said you would never actually end up getting. And she would say, it all makes sense now. It's all adding up together, and it's actually making a lot of sense. As this is when Deku would proceed to pretty much thank his mom, and a couple of years would go by, up until the day of the Sludge villain incident. Now, this is when Deku would essentially be in class, and the teacher would have thrown the papers in the air, telling them all that he knows that they all want to become heroes. As everybody would say that Izuku is definitely going to become the #1 hero. If they didn't know any better, they'd say he's even stronger than All Might. As some of the people in the class would begin to argue, saying, no, there's no way anybody can be stronger than All Might. He's just too powerful. And some of the other kids would say, but did you see what he did? He was able to complete the races, the ball throws, and just normal activities so easy, without even using his powers. As everybody would begin to, pretty much just talk amongst themselves, and pretty much just start discussing whether they do or don't believe if, Deku is stronger than All Might, I guess you could say. As this is when Deku would proceed to say, guys, calm down. I mean, we have a couple of minutes of class, and whether I'm stronger than him or not doesn't really matter to me. I mean, I just want to become a pro hero who can save everybody with a smile. I mean, All Might is one of my inspirations, and he is my hero. I would never want to pretty much disrespect him by, saying that I'm more powerful than him, even if that may be true. As everybody would listen to him, and they'd proceed to say, yeah, that's true. You have a pretty good point, Izuku. As Deku would say, yeah, I know. And this is when some of the people would say, Mr. Perfect over here knows everything, I guess. As, they would begin to pretty much just look at Deku. And this is when class would end and Deku would proceed to take a different path home. Seeing as Inko actually told him to get home early, and since he can't actually use his flying abilities, he decides to just take a little bit of a shortcut. As Deku was taking the shortcut, he would just have a weird feeling down his neck. He would feel as though something was about to approach him. As this is when the Sludge villain would lunge out of the sewer tunnel and lunge straight at Deku. As Deku would perceive the Sludge villain as if it was moving in slow motion. As Deku would step right out of the way, and the Sludge villain would splatter on the wall saying, give me your body, kid. As Deku would say, no, I'm not going to be giving you anything. Matter of fact, you need to get out of here before I have to do something. As the Sludge villain would say, you asked for it, kid. As he would lunge towards Deku, and it would proceed to engulf Deku. But right as Deku's, just sitting inside of it, Deku would get a strange feeling. As he was let his aura rage off of him. As he would scream and go, ah! As, the Sludge villain would be blown to pieces, literally scattering all over the place. As Deku would have, with nothing but his aura and energy, would have blasted the Sludge villain right off of him as easy as pie. And Deku would then proceed to basically just look at the Sludge villain as he begins to bottle it up. And this is when All Might would appear out of nowhere, seeing that Deku would have already handled the Sludge villain, thanking him for what he had done. And this is when Deku would actually proceed to fanboy, asking, what? All Might, can I get your autograph? As All Might would say, of course, young man, as he would proceed to sign Deku's notebook, and Deku would just be ecstatic. His mind would just be blown. The #1 hero, his hero, is standing right in front of him. As, All Might would ask him how he did that, and Deku would proceed to look at All Might, as he would then say, well, I did it by, as he would then proceed to say, it'd be a lot easier for me to just show you. As, this is when All Might would say, huh? And Deku would proceed to charge his aura, as All Might would be sent flying back. And in a pink aura, Deku would, emerge as his hair begins to flow up in the air. And Deku's eyes begin to turn a sort of black with red pupils in the middle. As All Might would begin to say that he is incredible, asking him if he would like to be his successor. And right as he says those words, All Might would go into his debuff state. As Deku would say, "Whoa, what?" As he would lunge towards All Might and pick him up by his shirt, asking him who he is. As All Might would begin to explain to Deku that he is in fact the real All Might and that, he doesn't need to worry about anything. As Deku would say, "All right then." As All Might would then proceed to explain, why that happened to him, and Deku would finally begin to understand what's going on. As Deku would proceed to apologize to All Might, telling him that he had no idea, as All Might would say that it's okay. As he would begin to explain his quirk, One for All, to Izuku. As Deku would be listening to All Might very attentively, wanting to know everything about this quirk that All Might has. As All Might would finally finish explaining the quirk of One for All, and Deku would proceed to say that sounds awesome. As this is when, Deku would proceed to say that he never knew that a quirk could actually be passed on. As All Might would proceed to tell him that, yeah, that's how his quirk works. As he would offer his power on to Deku. And this is when Deku would proceed to tell All Might that he doesn't want it. As All Might would say, What do you mean you don't want it? As Deku would say, yeah, I don't need it. Why not give it to somebody else who needs it? Maybe somebody with a heroic spirit. You don't always have to give it to somebody with a quirk, All Might. As All Might would hear what Deku would say, and he would then say, well, why would I give it to anybody else? As Deku would say that it'd be better for multiple people to be the, top heroes, instead of just having one overpowered person who can't exactly get to everybody all the time. As All Might would listen into that, and he would then understand what Deku means. As Deku would proceed to pretty much just look at All Might and tell him, yeah, but you know what I will take you up on? That offer to train me. As All Might would smile, and this is when, Deku would tell him if he wants to meet him at Dagoma Beach. As All Might would say, oh yes, of course. And this is when we're now actually going to basically just skip on to the very next day. As All Might would arrive to Dagoma, and this is when he would proceed to tell Deku that what he wants him to do is to pretty much clear the beach. As Deku would say that that's it, and All Might would proceed to say yes. As Deku would proceed to point his hand straight at all the filth and the garbage there, as he would obliterate it with a ki blast, and the entire beach would be cleared of all of the dirtiness and filthiness that was once there. As All Might's jaw would drop to the ground, and he would say, what? How are you able to do that? As Deku would proceed to explain to All Might what ki is, and how only certain people can actually access it. As All Might would ask Deku if he can actually help him access that thing. As Deku would proceed to basically try to train All Might in ki control for the next couple of 3 months, but All Might would not have the aptitude for it, and he would not actually be able to access any type of ki whatsoever. As this is when All Might would proceed to, kind of understand that, it's maybe not meant for him. As Deku would say that he's sorry, but, not everybody can exactly access this power, being ki. As All Might would understand, and he would proceed to tell Deku that he gets it, it's fine. As Deku would say, well, I'm glad you see it that way, All Might. I guess I was just lucky, and I'm pretty adept to, using ki. I mean, I've been training with it ever since I was about 12 years old. And it wouldn't really hurt me to pretty much keep training on that for the next couple months. As All Might and Deku would proceed to basically train together, with Deku actually doing a lot of spars with All Might, and Deku actually having to hold back a lot, seeing as he doesn't want All Might to see what his true power is. He doesn't want All Might to feel that Deku's already more powerful than him, as Deku's not really with All Might for the training. He just wants to be around his #1 hero, and he enjoys, this time that he can spend with All Might. As Deku would proceed to ask All Might if he has anybody in mind for the quirk of One for All, as All Might would tell Deku that he actually does. This young kid by the name of Togata Mirio. As, yep, Mirio is getting One for All in this version. And this is when Deku would ask All Might if he could actually introduce him to him. As All Might would invite Mirio over the next couple of days, and All Might and Mirio would proceed to train with him for the next 4 months. As, this is when Deku would, begin to know what Mirio's like, and he would actually gain a lot of liking towards Mirio. As Mirio would actually be getting trained by Deku, and Deku would be showing Mirio how to basically try to channel that power through him. As at first, Miria was using it in one single spot. But Deku would ask him, why not just channel it through all your entire body? And that way it'll be more efficient. As Miria would try, and by the end of the 10 months, Miria would have actually ended up getting access to 30% of One For All's power. And this is when we're now actually going to go ahead and skip on over to the day of the entrance exams. As, you know, now we're actually going to go over to the part where, you know, a couple of things are going to change. See, Deku would essentially proceed to walk up to UA as he's on his phone, just basically sending his mom a text that he arrived and that he's about to take the exam, and she would text him good luck, as Deku would be looking at the messages, and this is when he would not actually be paying attention to his surroundings, as he would end up bumping into a very familiar looking girl. He had actually seen her around one time, a long time ago actually, at a park, and this is when Deku would end up looking up as he would see a girl with pink hair, horns, and pink skin. As Deku would say, sorry about that. I didn't watch where I was going. Sorry about that again. As she would say, no, it's okay. As she would say, wow, it's crazy. I mean, this test is about to determine whether we can get into the greatest hero school. As Deku would say, yeah, I'm hoping that I can get in. I mean, I think I can, but, you know, I don't exactly want to be too confident of myself. As this is when Mina would proceed to basically say, yeah, I hope I get in too. As Deku would look at her and wish her good luck. As this is when, you know, Deku and Mina would basically proceed to walk inside. And, you know, as you know it, Mina would actually end up sitting right next to Deku. As Deku and Mina would actually proceed to end up just talking for a while, as Deku would end up getting to know Mina a little bit, and her personality would just rub off on Deku. As soon as he talks to her, he just feels this sort of attraction to her, and he instantly starts liking her. Not in that way yet, but he ends up feeling a really nice feeling every time that he talks to her. Her voice brings him in, and everything about her is just, it just makes him feel good, honestly. Now, this is when they would proceed to have the written portion, as Deku would proceed to do extremely well, as, you know, Deku actually has his intelligence. See, Majin Buu is actually extremely intelligent, paired with the intelligence of Izuku, and the fact that he actually does his studying, since, you know, he doesn't really have to focus too much on his strength, Deku would end up getting a perfect score, and he would end up going outside to the robot portion, as Mina and Deku would actually be separated by sections. As this is when we're now actually going to cut on over to the robot portion, as Deku would essentially be walking towards the front, towards the direction of Uraraka, as a young boy with blue hair would walk up to him, tell him to stop right there, not to go interrupt that young girl over there. As Deku would say, what are you talking about? As he would say, I know what you were about to do. You were going to go over there and interrupt that girl. As Deku would say, no, I wasn't. I was just walking towards the front. As Ida would look at Deku and say, oh, my apologies then. I'm sorry. As, oh, the drying machine is on. Hold on, let me switch locations. Alright, I'm back. Now, this is when Deku would proceed to look at Ida and proceed to basically tell him that, you know, everything's cool, you know, like, he shouldn't be so uptight all the time. As Ida would say, how dare you? And this is when Deku would say that, you know, he should loosen up a little bit. As he smacks Ida on the back and says, come on, cheer up. As he would then proceed to walk up to the front, and Ida and Deku would get into a conversation, with Ida asking him why he's so, you know, informal. And Deku would say that, you know, I mean, he could be really formal and all, but, I mean, they're here just to take a test. And, you know, he doesn't have to exactly sit here and overthink it. As long as he stays calm and does his best, he's confident that he'll get in. As Ida would take that into consideration, he would think that Deku was actually quite right. As President Mike would go on the loudspeaker, and he would proceed to tell them all to just go, 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 go. There's no countdowns in a real battle. What are they doing? Hurry up. As this is when the Deku would proceed to burst in there to the entrance exam, where, you know, Deku would proceed to essentially just begin to whoop Deku's whoop robots left and right. He would shoot ki blasts at every single one of the robots that are around, and Deku would proceed to essentially just begin to annihilate and obliterate each and every single one of them. He would proceed to shoot a bunch of ki blasts and simply destroy them by punching them, or, you know, creating clones of himself and spreading himself out through a different area. As Deku would actually end up rounding up about 169 points. As at this point, it's actually been about I'd say 3 minutes. And Deku would continue like this for about 4 more minutes, as he would end up racking up about 1,236 points. As Deku is just going insane, obliterating almost all of the robots and leaving almost nothing for the rest of the contestants. As Nezu would actually tell Deku that he needs to stop destroying those robots. As Deku would hear that and he would say, "Loud, heard ya," as he would proceed to basically just sit down and begin to chill. He'd pop in his earbuds and just begin to just listen, as, you know, to his Dragon Ball GT theme, you know, as this is when, you know, a giant zero-pointer robot would appear out of nowhere, as Deku would see the giant monstrosity. And seeing as Deku doesn't want to exactly shoot a ki blast at it and be boring, Deku would decide that he's going to cook himself up a little bit of a snack, as Deku would point 2 fingers straight at the zero-pointer, as he would shoot a pink energy, which would pretty much turn the robot into chocolate, as Nezu would see as the giant robot would proceed to instantly be turned into chocolate, as this is when Deku would proceed to essentially just rush up onto it, as the chocolate, it would be extremely massive, about the size of a house, since, as you guys know, you know, the little pieces of chocolate actually shrink when he's, you know, pretty much creating them. As a human would shrink to about the size of a little Hershey's bar. So I would say that this would shrink to about the size of, actually, no, that's a little too big. It would shrink to the size of about, I'd say a small apartment. A small apartment. Yeah, a small apartment. That sounds pretty reasonable. Now, this is when Deku would proceed to basically pick it up and begin to fly off, as he would have actually never ended up having to save Uraraka, since as soon as the zero-pointer was brought out, Deku completely obliterated it and took it out in one fell sweep. As Deku would have gone home, and I'm just going to go ahead and skip on over to the day where he pretty much gets his entrance letter, and he's told that he actually broke every single record on the book. He destroyed the zero-pointer and ended up getting, well, 0 points. He didn't really need them. And since he didn't save anybody, he didn't really get any rescue points for that. As Deku would have ended up being told that he got, you know, 1,000, the points that I said previously anyways. And, you know, this is when Deku would pretty much just spend the next couple of days off, just pretty much just chilling at his own house. And this is when he would now actually go to the mall one day, the day right before UA starts. As he would actually go to the mall, and this is when he would actually just be shopping around for, you know, some shirts and pants, you know, some shoes, some outfits, right? As he would pull up to his, you know, his local pretzel, as my personal favorite would definitely have to be the pepperoni one. I don't know, something about it is just so bomb. Anyways, this is when Deku would end up seeing a familiar face over there, as he would see a girl with pink hair and horns, as he would say it's unmistakable, and he would walk up to her and tap her shoulders. He would say, "Hey, didn't expect to see you here." She would say, "Oh, wow, hey, small world, right?" As Deku would say, "I'd say that again." And this is when Deku would begin to basically just hang out with Mina for the day, just walking around with her, and she would basically just walk around with him. As Deku would say that he got this, as he would pay for the, you know, the pretzels. As they would proceed to basically just hang out. And at the end of everything, Deku would actually end up getting Mina's number. And they would have ended up doing a little bit of flirting here and there, you know, a little something. Now, this is when I'm just going to go ahead and skip on over to the day of the class, as Deku would arrive to UA and basically get to the big door, as he would wonder who's going to be behind there, who are going to be his classmates for the next couple of years. And as soon as he opens the door, he sees a very familiar face, a blonde boy with some little red brownish looking eyes. As this is when he would see Ida, the kid he had previously met in the entrance exam, pretty much just scolding him, pointing his hand at him, telling him to get his feet off the desk and to pretty much respect UA property. As Deku would, you know, walk up to Ida and say, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, what's going on here?" As this is when Deku would look towards Bakugo and say, "Hey, Kachan, why not just get those, you know, those feet off of the desk and just have, you know, this kid just basically get off of your case?" As this is when Bakugo would open his eyes and see that it was Izuku. And this is when Bakugo would look towards him and say, "Izuku, I didn't expect to see you here. Didn't take you for the hero type." Not. As Bakugo would proceed to just start chuckling to himself, asking him if he's gotten any stronger than what he remembers. As Deku would say that, yeah, I guess he could say that a little bit, since he doesn't want to sound too cocky. And this is when Bakugo would proceed to basically just say, "Good, good. Then it'll be even better when I wipe that smug look off your face and carry you a new one. As Deku would look straight at Bakugo and have like a weird face on him. As Bakugo would get all up into Izuku's face, telling him that it's not going to be like the last time. This time he's going to utterly destroy him. As Mina would walk in front of Deku and say, hey, don't talk to him like that. I don't care what little rivalry you guys have between each other, but this stops now, unless you want me to get involved. And Bakugo would say, what are you going to do? As Deku would grab Bakugo's shirt by one hand and pick him up, as he would say, if you ever, as Aizawa would say, put him down and sit down. As everybody would do exactly that, and Deku would let Bakugo go. As Bakugo would just chuckle and say, he better let him go. And he's lucky that that teacher stopped him before anything else could have happened. As this is when we would now actually have Aizawa basically telling them to go basically get changed in the fitting rooms. Get into their little gym PE outfits, and they would all be in there as Deku would be built like a Greek god. Deku would be built like Majin Buu after fusing with Oob. After fusing with Buu, not Oob. I'd be getting confused with that, but you guys know what I mean. In GT, when he fused. And this is when Deku would basically be told by Kirishima that he is extremely manly. How did he get so strong? As Deku would proceed to tell him that he's just kind of always, trained his body. And he always just keeps up with him. And that's pretty much what lets him be this powerful. As Kirishima would say that that's so manly, telling him that he hopes he can be built like that someday. As Deku would basically pat him on the back, telling him that he can do that if he tries hard enough. I mean, if he could do it, why can't anybody else do it? As this is when they would basically go outside, and this is when Aizawa would toss the ball towards Deku, telling him to essentially just throw the ball. As Deku would grab it, and he would say, so do I use my full strength, or do I hold back? As Aizawa would say, you gotta use your full strength, kid. We're not here to measure how kinda powerful you are. We want to see how strong you possibly can get. As Deku would say, understood. And this is when Deku would, whip his arm back. As his aura would begin to charge up, and you would see a pink aura, just pretty much just flaring up around Izuku. As Deku would lunge the ball and throw it into infinity, creating a giant tornado in the area that he threw it by, as every single member in Class 1A would have been flung by the wind pressure that Deku had created. As Deku would, pretty much just say sorry about that, but he did say he wanted him to use his full strength. As Aizawa would get up and show everybody that he got infinity, as everybody would be stunned by the number. Infinity? What? That couldn't be right. But, I mean, it looks right. Look at what he did. He created a 30-foot crater in the ground and a tornado. This is incredible. As Aizawa's eyes would widen, and he would have the same reaction that he did when he realized that Deku wasn't totally useless in canon. Now, this is when Bakugo would lunge towards Izuku, telling him how he got so strong, getting right into his face, as he would have sweat drops going down him. And Deku would proceed to basically look at Bakugo as he would tell him that he needs to back down unless he wants to get that same treatment that the ball got. As Bakugo would back away from him, and Aizawa would basically have a sweat drop going down his face. As this is when we would now have Deku going through the rest of the couple exams, as he would proceed to get god tier scores on everything. He would obliterate every single test and get numbers that nobody in the world has ever gotten. Not even anybody like All Might. And afterwards, after Deku leaves, things would just get even crazier from there. Everybody would proceed to talk about how awesome Deku was, and Mina would stop Deku right after class, asking him how he got so powerful and what his quirk is, as Deku would proceed to say that he's quirkless, and that his power actually stems from magic and ki. As Mina would say, what's ki and magic? As Deku would begin to explain it to her, and she would say that's so interesting. As Deku would proceed to tell her that, he could actually train her in basically flight. He can teach her how to fly, maybe. As this is what Deku's basically going to proceed to teach her in. He's going to teach her just how to fly. No ki blast, no nothing else. Since I don't really like it. Actually, no. Take that back. I don't even want her to fly. Yeah, I don't even want her to fly. Anyways, this is when Deku would proceed to ask her if she would need some help training in hand-to-hand combat. And she would say yeah, and they would basically go after class, and they would proceed to basically go to Mina's house. As Deku would go into her room, and this is when Deku would proceed to basically teach her some basic, some basic combat moves, and he would notice that she's extremely flexible. This is going to be extremely useful for when we begin to study later, as Deku would proceed to essentially ask her if she would, she would like to hit the books a little bit. As Mina would basically give him a sly smirk, and she would say, I thought you'd never ask. As they would begin to start, watching some history, science, math, psychology, everything you guys can think of, and Deku would be going to town. He'd be doing some light studying and sparring, I guess you could say, with his battle Saiyan armor on. And this is when we're now actually just going to go ahead and skip on over to the day of the heroes versus villains. As the school day would basically go by about as normal as it gets. As Deku would pretty much just be chilling in class. As everybody would be wondering, what's going on. And Deku would proceed to basically tell them all that, this is going to be extremely awesome. As we would now have All Might lunging in through the door, saying, I am here like a normal person, doing his normal, normal bravado, just talking, telling them how to get dressed, and that costume makes the hero. As everybody would go in there to get dressed, and Deku would emerge with his Majin Buu costume. The same thing that Majin Buu basically wore in the Dragon Ball GT series, Deku would basically have as his hero costume. As this is when the teams would be announced. The teams would go as follow: Mina and Izuku versus Bakugo and Ida. As Deku would basically look towards Ida and say that, he hopes this is pretty fun. As, Ida would say that he can't wait to fight him. As this is when Bakugo would basically just be sweating bullets, wondering to himself how in the world he's going to manage to take him down. He's even more powerful than he could ever remember, and he doesn't even know if Deku was holding back. As Deku was definitely holding back. If he threw the ball as hard as he could, he would have destroyed the world. As, this is when we would now have, basically the heroes versus villains going. As I don't even know if it's okay to get into detail on how badly Bakugo gets folded. It's not okay, to say the least. As soon as Bakugo lunged at Deku, Deku palmed Bakugo's face, and he basically proceeded to turn him into chocolate and eat him. He ate Bakugo, quite literally. As his hair would begin to turn, blonde, and Deku would gain the abilities of Bakugo. As All Might would have been on the speaker asking Deku what he did. As Deku would say that, don't worry, he can turn him back to normal. As All Might would say he better be able to. As Deku would lunge in and destroy Ida, and he would proceed to basically have, Bakugo come out. As Bakugo would be like, the horrors that I saw in there, no man should ever see. As this is when afterwards, Deku and Mina would proceed to basically go off to Mina's house and do some good old-fashioned study. They would do some math. And Deku's studying in the math department. And this is when we would now have Deku and Mina basically just hanging out any single day that they don't have school, as well as, basically after school. They would go out to the mall, the park, they'd go out to eat every now and then, and they'd basically play video games at Deku's house, as well as watching a couple of movies, and they'd basically just be having a blast. Now, this is when we're now actually going to cut on over to the day of the USJ attack, as everybody would be on the bus, and this is when Suyu would bring up who the strongest in the class is, as everybody in, Synchronous would say that it would have to be Deku. He's the strongest in the class by a long shot, and that ability to turn people into chocolate, how can you even defend against something like that? Maybe they can use something to reflect it, as some of the people would say, wait, wouldn't that just turn that object into chocolate? As people would begin to pretty much just speculate about Deku's powers and his full capabilities. As before anybody could get started, they would basically arrive to the USJ, as, nothing really would start to change. As this is when we would now have a couple of things actually going different. C13 would give her hero speech, except this time when Kurogiri would actually appear and begin to try to teleport everybody, Deku would immediately rush on over to Kurogiri as he shoots a chocolate beam straight through him, as the beam doesn't even touch Kurogiri, and Deku would still end up getting teleported over to the villain side. As in this version, Deku would end up taking out the villains very simply. He would shoot a ki blast straight into the water, which has the same effect of the punch that he threw in canon, and Deku would proceed to basically just grab Suyu and Mineta and fly them off to where they belong. as in a flash, Deku would fly by, pretty much saving every single person who needed saving, such as, Kaminari, Momo, and Jiro, and other people like that, as he would have immediately blitzed over to where Mina was at, and he would have ended up saving her as well, as he would have then looked over to, Aizawa's direction, as he was actually holding up very well. At this point, the Nomu still hadn't rushed towards Aizawa, and this is when the Nomu would have lunged towards him, as Deku would hear, Shigaraki saying, "Nomu, kill Aizawa." As this is when Deku would immediately blitz right in front of the Nomu's punch, as the Nomu's hit would go straight through Deku's belly. As this is when Aizawa would widen his eyes, saying, "No, kid!" As we would then have Deku begin to laugh, as he would say that tickled, as the Nomu's punch would have basically not done anything. His punch would have pretty much just molded Deku's body into a different shape, and Deku's stomach would basically just have the Nomu ricochet off of him. As Deku would then point two fingers at the Nomu, turning him into chocolate, and Shigaraki would say, "What? This is unfair. They cheated. They cheated." As Deku would begin to lunge towards Shigaraki, turn him into chocolate, and he would then proceed to say he's kind of hungry at the moment, as he would eat Shigaraki, and Aizawa would see what Deku had done, as he would begin to question Deku on what he did, as Deku would say not to worry, he can just let him out whenever he needs. And this is when, Aizawa would just basically just be quiet. There's nothing he could really do about anything, since, this kid was able to take down that monster so effortlessly. Who knows what he could do to him? As Aizawa would basically try to erase Deku's quirk, but he would notice he can't. He doesn't know what this kid's powers are, but whatever they are, there's something completely out of the ordinary and out of this world. As he's extremely glad that Deku's on their side and not on the villains. As this is when we would now have the day of the UA Sports Festival, as Deku would be told that he actually has to be giving the speech for, what's going to be going down. And this is when we would now have, Deku giving a pretty inspirational speech, something that Oob would give in the G-Tier series, inspiring everybody across the globe who was watching the event. As this is when they would be announced that they're actually going to be having a race. As soon as, the whistle is blown, Deku would instantly teleport to the finish line. As this is when Todoroki and Bakugo would basically be racing for second place. As soon as Bakugo was about to actually get first place, Deku would teleport Bakugo back to the start line just to be a DICK. And I can't say the word because I don't want to get demonetized. But enough of that. Anyways, just to kind of be mean to him. And Bakugo would be so angry as he would proceed to basically barely make it to the people who are actually going to be allowed to go into the next section. As this is when we would now actually go into the Cavalry Battle. As the team that Deku was on would basically go as follows. It would consist of Deku, Mina, as well as 2 clones of himself, as he would have asked Midnight if he was allowed to do that, and she would have ended up telling him that, yeah, she doesn't see why not. As she would proceed to basically just blow the whistle, and this is when Deku would basically just fly himself and Mina up into the air, as they would basically just chill there, and Deku would basically be talking to her, as this is when Bakugo would essentially try to, use his explosions to go rush up to Deku and basically take his headband. As soon as Bakugo does this, Deku would, scowl at Bakugo as he turns him into chocolate, and Bakugo falls onto the ground, as Bakugo's team would be eliminated. Everybody on his team would have been taken out, seeing as their rider would have been on the ground, and Bakugo would actually be eliminated in the Cavalry Battle. He would have done this just to mess with Bakugo, honestly. Seeing that Bakugo pretty much just treats him with nothing but disrespect, Deku would see it as, kind of fair. As everybody in the stands would basically just be thinking that Bakugo kid was a real eyesore. He was awful. He's not exactly what a hero should be, but maybe he could change. As, some people would begin to think that. As this is when we now have, the rest of the battles go on. As obviously Deku's team would end up winning after the rest of the teams would have seen what Deku could do to them, as they would have decided that, yeah, they're staying away from him. Definitely. 100%. They're not going near him at all. As we would now have the first battle consisting of Deku versus Shinso. As this battle would actually go very quickly. See, As soon as the battle would start, Shinso would ask Deku a question, and Deku, being, the person he is, he would end up answering him, as Shinso would have basically asked him what's it like to be born with such an amazing power and to be so gifted. As Deku would say that he's not, as soon as he does that, Shinso would go into his mind. As soon as he tries, he wouldn't be able to. Shinso would have a roadblock in front of him, something that he had never encountered before. As soon as Shinso tried it, Deku would have actually used his telepathic abilities to get inside of Shinso's mind and and basically pull a Uno reverse card on Shinso. As he would have Shinso basically walk out of the arena, as he would have ended up putting a Majin mark on Shinso's head, and Shinso would have basically just walked off of there. As this is when we would now have the second battle, Deku versus Todoroki. As before the battle would start, Todoroki would have ended up waging war upon Deku, and he would have ended up telling him that he's going to be winning this with nothing but half of his strength. As Deku would just chuckle to that, and he would end up, telling him that, oh, he'll have to see if he can actually, go through with that. As Todoroki, this is not okay. Deku would proceed to do things to this man that it should just not be said on YouTube. As, Deku would have whooped this man, Todoroki. He would have basically shot his geyser at Deku. And as soon as he did, Deku would have shot a ki blast, instantly obliterating it and turning it to ash. As Deku would essentially blitz in front of Todoroki. And he would proceed to pretty much just flick him off of the stance, shooting him straight into a crater in the wall. As Todoroki would be rushed to recovery girl. And everybody in the stands would just be silent. As they would have seen this kid basically take down the second most powerful kid here with no effort at all. As at this point, the League of Villains, or the last member, I guess you could say, the remaining members, this being All For One, would have been watching what was going on, and he would be extremely angry, seeing that this was the kid who ruined his plans. He can't count on his successor anymore, and he would decide that he's going to create a different plan. That plan is going to be, I might as well just tell you guys. He's essentially going to ask Dr. Ujiko to basically create him another body, a robotic one. He would basically ask Dr. Ujiko to make him an android, make him keep his quirk, and give him infinite energy. A lot of you guys are probably like, whoa, what are you doing, Zether? Like, you can't do this. And to that I say, do you really think that any version of I can give All For One any power, any power in the My Hero universe, and it won't do anything. It simply won't. This is Majin Buu we're talking about. He could obliterate a universe. So, this is nothing. Anyways, the final battle would consist of Tokiyami versus Deku. And do I even gotta cover this? If he was able to beat Todoroki that easily, just imagine what he could do to Tokiyami. As soon as the battle would start, Deku would fly over to the sun as he would scream, "Solar Flare!" As he would blind, Dark Shadow or Tokiyami, and Dark Shadow would proceed to essentially die. Just kidding. And, Dark Shadow would be taken out, and Dark Shadow would be severely injured by that. Dark Shadow wouldn't be able to be called upon for the next week, resulting in Tokiyami basically not being able to go into his internships or really do anything at all. And this is when we're now actually just going to basically talk about how Deku ends up getting his medals. He ends up getting his first place, Tokiyami second, Todoroki third. But just like in canon, not just like in canon, when they return to school, Deku would be the one with the most offers. Sure, Todoroki was the son of Endeavor, but this kid is a monster. And when they would be asked what their hero names are going to be, Deku would proceed to basically tell them that his hero name is going to be the magic hero, Oob. As that name is just something that he feels that resembles him. As Majin Buu was evil, and maybe if he flips that around, he can create his own persona. As he would have ended up going with the name of Oob, and in terms of who he chose for his hero internship, he would have ended up choosing somebody that he didn't think he was actually going to be choosing. He ended up going with Fat Gum. As, yep, that's what we're basically going to be covering on the next part. So I hope you guys are hyped for the next part, which, it's going to be part 2 of 2 of what if Midoriya or Deku was the reincarnation or, was just Majin Buu, which is essentially what we're doing, but more specifically, what if Midoriya was Majin Buu, pretty much. as I hope you guys, enjoyed this video, and I hope it brought you guys, pretty good chill time, as I actually had an amazing time recording this. Before I end the video, however, I would appreciate it if you guys could actually stay just a teeny tiny bit longer, as I do actually have a couple of things to ask. Seeing as I'm going to be hitting 10K soon, I want you guys to basically go to my community tab, and basically just comment down any questions you guys have for me to answer on my community tab, which I will be posting as soon as I hit 10K. Now, with that being said, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, consider subscribing as it's free, and turn those, post notifications on to get informed for when the next part of this series will drop. But with that being said, guys, it has been your boy Zether, and I am out.